is my great pleasure today to bring you Azra Bertrand, Dr. Azra Bertrand. He is a multi-award winning author, healer, teacher, and mystic, renowned for his visionary merging of sacred science, myth, and cosmology. He holds a degree in research biochemistry, as well as a doctorate from the Duke University School of Medicine. You can find him at azrabertrand.com. That address will be in the notes for this conference. And welcome, Dr. Bertrand. It's really a delight to get to speak with you. I think before I ask you to start telling us about your gorgeous and deep work with what you call biomancy, I'm going to read the sentences that you shared with me about it so that our listeners can just start absorbing the depth here, and then I'll turn it over to you. Biomancy is the art and science of organic embodiment. It restores our natural connection to Earth and fills us with vitality and magic that is our natural birthright. When we reweave ourselves back into nature, we become oracles for Mother Earth. It is time to awaken our innate magic and embody our natural birthright of radiance and intuition in connection with our ecosystems. Biomagic and eco-magic are the medicine of our times, rooted in our bodies, our feelings, and our quantum planetary mother. What intriguing language. So tell us more. Tell us about biomancy, and then where we'll go next will be how can people engage with it.
Sure. Thank you, Chara, so much for that introduction. And I'm very excited to be here and share. And I'll say the super brief of what biomancy is, right? Because the word itself came to my wife and I as we were dreaming it into being a few years ago when she was pregnant with our daughter. And we received a really strong message at that moment that we just needed to spend time on the earth. And so we did. We sat on the earth, we lay on the earth, we meditated, we prayed. There's this beautiful, probably 80-foot tall maple tree in our yard that casts this beautiful dappled shade. And we sat there in meditation for sometimes hours a day for months. And this vision of biomancy started to come to us. And it really was something that I'd been preparing for a lifetime, for this lifetime at least. And the essence of it, is that we are filled with a natural magic. Our bodies are filled with magic. The earth is filled with magic. But somehow our culture, the mainstream culture, has absolutely forgotten this. And as a result, most people have forgotten it to some extent. Even people who work with magic aren't yet aware of all of the power in our body and all of the magic in the earth. And so biomancy is really, the word biomancy, it's an old Greek origin. Bio meaning life, mancy meaning magic or mantic or oracular. And so it really is the art and science of the study of magic in life, in nature, in our bodies, and reweaving that connection. Because anyone who's done work with magic or synchronicity, with manifestation, you understand that the more connected we are, the more entangled we are. So if anyone who works with quantum physics and the principles of that, the more entangled we are, the more magical connection we can share and open and activate. And so that's in a one line short what biomancy is. And the long answer the long answer to what biomancy is that I've been studying and preparing to teach and share this for an entire lifetime. And as you mentioned, my background is in medicine, in research. So I have a degree in research biochemistry. I'm a medical doctor, and I did the standard training and then residency. I did a 10-year plus clinical practice in integrative medicine and mind-body medicine, and from there I began to go run mystery schools with my wife, and we wrote a couple of books that won the Nautilus Award twice, which is we're really proud of. But the essence of what I'm getting at is that there is a remarkable merging now of science, of sacred science, so real, practical, grounded, peer-reviewed science that you can find in the best articles and the best databases, with the world of magic and spirit and metaphysics. So the history of science and alchemy, or the history of science and metaphysics, was that they were once unified. And only 300-400 years ago, there was not this strange conception that we have in the modern world that somehow magic and spirit aren't real. The only thing that's real is what you can see with your five, see, feel, touch, with your five senses. But of course, there's a world beyond that, and everyone's known that. All of the indigenous cultures, all of the traditional cultures, even in the Western tradition, Pythagoras and Plato, who started really the sciences, the natural sciences, wrote all about how the world is a living, sentient being, and it's our prerogative really to become more connected, to reweave our connection. And in doing so, we start to directly perceive the things that, what shamans have always said, and what science is now showing that's real. For example, a little tiny example of how do our bodies actually work? Well, every single cell in our body, and we have about 50 trillion, is actually emitting a pitch, is actually emitting a tone. It's actually singing. It's a field of science called sonocytology. Sono meaning sound, cytology, the study of cells. And so this isn't just some, kind of far out random thing. This is being used for high-level medical diagnostics, where an unhealthy cell emits a screech, a disharmonic sound that you can perceive one cell that's out of balance in a tube of 5 million or 10 million blood cells, for example. And so this is real medical diagnostics. And beyond that is to really understand that the way that our universe works and the way that our bodies work are absolutely filled with what we would call magic, simply because we don't understand. We haven't opened our senses to it yet. And that's what I'm trying to teach and what I'm trying to share with all of this.
Beautiful. Thank you. I want to briefly highlight something that you said, because I think, everything you said was striking to me, but it's really important, I think, for people to absorb this idea you were talking about. And my original training is in medieval and Renaissance history, so I understand this well, and I teach a little bit of the history of science. It's really important for people to recognize that it's only been 200 or 300 years of human history that we've created such a radical split between what we might term as spirituality or magic or alchemy and what we term science and the rational. Most human cultures have not lived that way. And so, you can make all kinds of arguments about that. One potential argument is maybe we're not really meant to live with this radical division between these parts of ourselves. But so much of what you said was acknowledging that and talking about how we're now trying to do some reweaving. So a couple of topics seem to arise immediately. One is, do you want to say anything more right now about how you're seeing science and magic, science and spirituality in conversation? Or would you like to go into talking about how do people participate in this?
I'll just say, I think it's important to get the big story, just so we'll just touch on that. It's so important, this idea. And I think most people get this now, is that the story that we're living by in our world. There's a kind of we may not even, a lot of people don't even recognize it's a story. It's that, well, we're in the West, religion, essentially the Christian church and the Catholic church, dominated the way of thinking for a couple thousand years almost. But very gradually, starting around the 1600s, 1700s, it began to be that authority of how the world works, right, began to be challenged by science. And at first, it felt like a huge freedom because they're, not saying anything about Christianity per se, but the institution of the church was oppressive, was authoritarian, was, of course, held inquisitions, of course, did witch hunts. There was a strong persecution of magic, except for the magic in the Christian church. That was the only magic that was allowed. But at least there was magic in the Christian church. But when science came, it started to open up this field of, well, maybe knowledge can come from other sources. And so there was a brief window where science was really set free from dogma and from the things that we know as science now are very different than the actual heart and essence of science. And of course, the heart and the essence of religion and spirituality, there's always a beautiful piece at the heart of that as well. So I'm talking about institutions and what they've done, and so the thing I'm trying to say is that science has now become a religion. It's now become dogmatic. It's now said that the only form of knowledge that's legitimate is what the academy or what the consensus science says is true. So of course, that's not correct, right? Of course, what is
it's a form of fundamentalism. As someone with training in the history of religion, I try to point that out to people.
Sure.
We don't necessarily need fundamentalism of any kind.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, when it occurs in defense of science, a lot of us don't even recognize it because we take that as a norm.
Yeah, that's right. And science puts forward a cosmology, a world story, and it's how we organize ourselves, our lives, our thinking, how most people do. And what science says is that we live in a universe where spirit doesn't exist. In fact, science says that human consciousness is just an illusion. And, this is materialist science, mechanistic materialist science, that, of course, that magic isn't real. Of course, that, that other living things don't have intelligence or consciousness. So humans are as good as it gets, and that never works out very well when we have that amount of hubris and arrogance. People have been writing myths about that for a long time, but the scientific worldview is fundamentally broken, and it says that life is meaningless and has no spirit in magic. That's what the scientific worldview teaches. And so, very clearly, and of course, it's there's a machine intelligence about it. This idea of artificial intelligence or machine consciousness. It leads toward the destruction of our human bodies and the Earth's biosphere, which is very clear for everybody to see, right? So this narrative of science, this story, we need something different if we want to survive, very, very simply. And so everyone, I think everyone gets this, okay? But what is this new story, or what is this new old story? And so for most of the time humans have been around, humans have been both scientists as well as magicians, or both scientists and shamans. And so there's more than one way of legitimately gathering information. There's more than one kind of technology. So not just physical technologies, but there are energy technologies and magic and spiritual technologies. Every traditional culture knows this. Every traditional culture is full not just of magicians and shamans, but also scientists who very carefully observe their environment, very carefully understand what conditions certain plants need to grow and thrive, or what conditions that humans need to grow and thrive, and very carefully gather the evidence from the physical world and the metaphysical world. So so that's the perspective. It's science plus magic. It's science plus mysticism. The science is very valid at gathering information in a certain window. It's Carl Sagan called science a candle in the darkness. And the metaphor was was very much, it's very intentional, a single candle in this vast mystery. And you can highlight and see a few things with that candle that are very important and very real. But there's this vast and amazing mystery that we have to start using our extra sensory capacities to start to perceive. Yeah, because we have 5 senses that most of us are aware of, but it turns out that we have many, many more senses. We have 50 trillion cells, each of which is sensing and perceiving information and operating like a quantum computer. And even in our own skulls, we actually have 2 brains. We have 2 fully functioning brains. The cerebral cortex, which is what most people are familiar with as our brain, because especially the neocortex is responsible for rational thinking, logical thinking, our everyday, ordinary problem-solving mind. But that's an evolutionary newcomer as far as our nervous system and our brains go, because we have a back brain, and governed really in a major way by the cerebellum, which is this astonishing second brain, and it literally looks like a second brain. Cerebellum means, the little cerebrum, or the small brain, and it contains 70% of the brain cells. In that small brain, that's 1/10 of the size of the cerebral cortex, but from an evolutionary perspective has been around for 600 million years or something like that, compared to a few million for the human neocortex. And so the point of what I'm trying to say here is that we have vast capacities to gather very real information that would be considered magic by scientists, but considered very, very real by every traditional culture. So that's the context. The woo is true, the magic is real. And what's exciting about science right now is that the leading edge science, the cutting edge science, is showing exactly how this, the woo works, basically, exactly how the magic works, and ways that are astonishing. And so, for example is that when we take an imaginal journey, when we, we might have been told in the past was a fantasy journey, when we begin to imagine things and to feel things as we're imagining them, we are actually reforming our neural networks. We are changing the way our synapses form and reform. And we begin to bring things into reality just by manifesting them. And the healing, in the science of healing, it's shown that people who have had a stroke, who can't actually move or walk, if they start imagining walking, moving, bending, all of a sudden their mobility comes on. And so this is real, prominent
just
science.
Mention, in case anybody wants to follow up this angle, I'm not sure whose work you're thinking of, but I'm definitely thinking of the work of Norman Doidge in Canada, who's written several books tracking exactly what you just talked about, how neuroplasticity works. His surname is Doidge. And exactly what you said, he has worked directly with people who are recovering from some kind of severe neurological cataclysm, and use this science of neuroplasticity to regain brain function. It's completely amazing. And it really is. I'm so glad you thought of that example, because I wasn't thinking of it, but it really is an example of how the imaginal and the physiological come together, and how we're starting to look at that through the lens of science.
That's brilliant. I'm glad you referenced this man. I don't know him, but I'm
he's
interested.
Wonderful. One of his most well-known books is The Brain That Changes Itself, I think. But just an aside in case people want to delve into this. His work
absolutely
is accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it goes on and on from there. And I can't obviously in our talk about all of this, but I'll just mention a few other things. And so sound healing, sound healing. The people who love music and love sound, who work with it, understand that there's just a tremendous power. When you start looking at the physics of how our universe operates, you start to understand, every single thing in this universe is vibrating. And when that vibration happens, it's creating a sound. And so even quantum particles emit things called phonons, which are sound particles. They're actually sound particles, just like you can have a photon, which is a light particle. And so everything in the universe is emitting sound. And when you start to look at the science of cymatics, for example, and how sound frequencies actually imprint geometric forms into matter, this is what happens. When sound frequencies or other frequencies interact with matter, they imprint geometric forms. So this is very real. And you can see this if you YouTube cymatics, and you can see it, and it's quite remarkable to see. And so, and again, so people working with sound intuitively know that it's doing something very powerful. And now the science is out that shows that sound healing actually, it changes the expression of our DNA. So it changes our epigenetic expression. There was a study about 3 years ago now. And when you read the introduction to it, in a good journal, and when you read the introduction, it sounds like a metaphysician. This is a PhD research
I have to ask you if you have that reference.
I don't have the reference on me in this exact moment. But
yeah, maybe I'll ask you and see.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just, to make a connection for our listeners, I'll point out we have another speaker in this conference, Jaylene Tracy, who is a sound healer who does epigenetic work. So you're talking about the theory and how this is being researched, and she'll be talking about the actual practice. So beautiful.
Yeah, brilliant.
Back to you.
Yeah. And so, right. So I think, I think that, I think the listeners will probably start to get this, and they probably already just know it instinctively and intuitively. But the science is starting to amazingly define and delineate and describe everything that is true. that science has supposedly said isn't true. If you look at Wikipedia, everything that you know to be true, they'll say, no, this isn't real, this is pseudoscience. No, that's not true, because the very best science shows that it is real. And it extends also to things like telepathy, and which is proven to be true at a level that it's more scientifically certain than the engineering precision that's needed to launch the space station into orbit. So we're talking, in science terms, a certainty of 1 in a billion, or 1 to 1 in 10 billion, which is it's enormous certainty that telepathy, for example, works. And it's not just telepathy; there are many different kinds of psychic magical phenomenon that have now been proven to be true without any kind of doubt. And yet somehow the academy says no, it's not true. Of course, that would change. It just takes decades sometimes for the establishment and the status quo to yield ground, because the implications are, because all these things work, it means that our understanding of physics is absolutely flawed. And there is going to be a sea change, just like 120 years ago with the quantum revolution, and how that fundamentally changed physics. There will be the equivalent of how in essence, how consciousness and magic are working with those same kind of energies, but applied to the human body and applied on the macro scale. So most quantum processes happen with really small particles, we're told. However, where science is starting to show how our biology is based on quantum physical processes. So our energy generation, even plants, is, when they gather sunlight and turn that into energy that we can use, that happens through quantum biological processes. So the point, I think you get the point, the point is that we really are made of magic and in a world filled with magic. And then it comes back to the other question you said, well, how? how do we get from there, from here to there? How do we begin to weave our connection more deeply into this world of magic that's our birthright, that our innate biological magic and the magic in this world? How do we begin to approach that? And so it's a profound question, right? And it's a really short answer is a path of practice or a path of study. You can't, do it all in a day or a moment. It's something that if you apply yourself to, like anything, you'll see amazing results. And so one of the things my organization is doing is creating a new model of biomagical education. So a university of biomagic. It's called, Biomancy University. And I'm so excited to be offering that because that's what's needed, really. Studying the science, it's like Hogwarts. It's like you go in and we all have magic, but we need to learn, we need to study, we need to apply ourselves. And we have to shift our belief systems and open up to what really is possible and is being proven. And we also have to embody it. We have to learn how to open our magic. We have to learn the technologies of the inner technologies of magic and in how to weave ourselves back into nature.
Yes.
So
Much of it is about a connection or reconnection, right?
mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you want to talk about a couple of practices that you teach to give people some insight into what this looks like, because in the big picture, you're talking about reconnecting our intellect to our spiritual perception, our intuitive perception.
Yes.
I know reconnection to the earth and her beings is a very big part of your work. Mm-hmm. So when people study with you, when they feel very attracted to these concepts that you're laying out, what do you guide them to do?
Sure. Yes. All right. So let's talk about the embodied practice of it. I think that's the place to begin. And the very first place to begin with this is reweaving. I call it the Sola Terra sequence. Sola as in sun, Terra as in earth, and reweaving our magical body connection and our physical body to these fundamental intelligent beings that we live on and that create everything. And a few pieces of information, and then I'll begin. And this is to orient everyone to how important the earth and the sun are to our being. And you know this at some level already, I know. But to just get this, that all of the energy on this planet that grows all of the life on this planet, it comes from the sun, with a very, very small exception. There's a little bit of heat in the center of the earth that grows some things around heat vents in the middle of the ocean or around volcanoes and stuff. But 99.99999% of the energy on this planet comes from the sun. Because of that, every cell in existence has biological clocks that orient to the sun. 50 trillion cells in our body orient to the sun. When we wake up in the morning, 10 to 20% of our DNA turns on with sunlight. 10 to 20%. There is nothing as powerful as the effect of sunlight or darkness on our physiology. So it's to start to understand that. And that's the physical level. And for every physical thing happening, or physical biological thing, there is an energetic or spiritual aspect that's parallel, that's also present. So if the sun is delivering us certain biological, physiological energies, it's also delivering us certain spiritual energies or certain subtle energies. And this is how things work on this planet: as above, so below. As in the micro, as in the macro, and the earth as well, right? So when I'm talking about the earth, I'm not just talking about the plant life and the food we eat and the water, etc. I'm talking about the magnetic and the electromagnetic fields of the earth that most people don't even think about. So, for example, the earth has an electromagnetic heartbeat called the Schumann resonance. If you go onto NASA's, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration website, they actually refer to it as a heartbeat, like NASA refers to it as a heartbeat. It's this pulse that guides and entrains every living cell on the earth, including those in our body. And the magnetic field of the earth, the geomagnetic field of the earth, that again aligns and guides all of our life. And we are sensitive to this. So when we put our feet on the earth, when it's it's very cold where we are at the moment, where I live at least, but as you can, put your bare feet on the earth. As soon as you do that, instantly a flood of negatively charged ions or electrons, however you want to think of them, flood into our body and give us a sense of vitality and radiance. They quench inflammation. They reduce inflammation. And this is this very direct communication that's happening between our bodies and the earth and our bodies and the sun. So that's the little bit of information to get you started, how important it is. But what I recommend to people and what I teach is, as you can, ideally barefoot, to go out and put your feet on the earth and to begin to, if it helps, you can close your eyes, I often do, to begin to tune in to these subtle energetic threads of connection. You can begin to imagine them or see them with your inner eye, if that helps. You can just open your senses. You can direct your palms down and begin to feel the electromagnetic fields of the earth. And it's proven that we can sense them. So humans are magnetoreceptors. We can sense this. The science is there. It's happening at the subtle levels. But to begin to just attune, to feel, to begin a two-way conversation. And this is another big piece, and you see this in every indigenous culture, in every traditional culture. What you see is a devotional relationship to the earth. In biomancy, the word the mancy also has associations with romance. Okay, so it really is this love affair with the earth, and a love affair with our body as a piece of the earth that's on loan to us for a bit. And opening opening ourselves, opening our subtle energy bodies, our heart, our love, our devotion, our super sensible capacities, and to begin doing this with the earth. And when you feel comfortable and you're connected, you can raise your hands to the sun and begin to receive the energy from the sun. So I do this every morning. Unless there's snow on the ground. Even if there's snow on the ground, I'm wearing shoes, but I'm still out there and doing this. And every dawn and every dusk, attuning myself to these energies. And in fact, my whole family does this for the most part. Including my 2-year-old daughter, she comes out. And so when you do this, when you begin to weave your imaginal body or your biomantic body or your energy body in, so not just your physicality, but when you open your senses to these other worlds, then something magical becomes possible. Something profound begins to open. And so what we can begin to perceive, the more we can perceive, the more we can receive. And really, in this world, the biggest crisis is a crisis of connection, and because of that, a crisis of perception. And so as we begin to open that connection and open that perception, all of a sudden our magic starts to come online in a new way. It's a very simple practice, but very profound. And you see this practice in petroglyphs, so in rock carvings and in cave paintings. This hands up. The oldest one I've seen is maybe 30,000 years old, but you see this, of course, in ancient Egyptian and hieroglyphs. This is the Ka body posture. The Ka body is the energy body, and the Egyptian, the ancient Egyptian alchemical practice, this awareness of our energy body. It's no coincidence that it's hands up toward the sun.
Yes. And I'm thinking, as you say that, of the decades old body of work by the clairvoyant energy healer Donna Eden, who talks about what happens to our meridians when we do these postures. So there's there's a spiritual resonance, there's all kinds of physiological resonance. And if you have the scientific equipment to measure the meridians, or you're clairvoyant and can see the meridians, there's an immediate response in the body to this earth connection and these postures. Which is
yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, there's so many exciting things, but one of the exciting things is that what has been called our aura, or our bioenergetic aura, by in the New Age community. It's been known by a million names in every indigenous culture: our rainbow body, our dragon body, our Ka body, our body of light, our our robe of glory. There's so many names, because it's been recognized in many traditions. Science can actually now measure many aspects of our human biofield that we can't see with our normal eyes and our normal senses, but that absolutely register on the electromagnetic monitors, that there are biophotons, so biological particles of light that our cells emit, biophotons that are measurable on these things. And so yeah, our as you're mentioning, our aura, our human biofield, is very much a real thing, and very, very measurable. And there's so much magic that happens even with that. And one of the really interesting things that happens is that our hearts are subtle sensors of electromagnetic fields, such that when we're in the same room with someone, even if they're across 6-10 feet, our hearts are measuring each other's electromagnetic biofields and coming slowly into coherence. And so if two people in the same room, if they become calm and still and come into a quiet place, all of a sudden our autonomic nervous systems and our hearts will become coherent. And this is happening beyond, most people aren't aware of it. This is just another example. But yeah, so when we ground down and open to the earth and to the sun in the way that our ancestors would have done, amazing things happen on a spiritual level and on a biological level, both. And that's the point, right, of biomancy, is that these spirit affects our biology, and biology affects our spirit. They're a seamless world. We're not these, we're not this like either or. There's either magic or science, or there's either matter or imaginal. The two worlds meet and merge and touch, and it's this sacred place. It's that. And many cultures, many traditional cultures, there was the idea of the sacred tree of life, who's the symbol. It's a very powerful symbol. The roots go down to the center of the earth and the lower world, or the world of the ancestors, and the branches go up to the heavens and stars. But in the middle is this trunk, or this our body. It represents our body, and how we receive the information from all the worlds and alchemize them in the vessel of our body. It's an old magical or alchemical symbol, but it's very, very real.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that practice and some of the many understandings around it. There are two more things that I would like to ask you about. The second will be to tell us about how people can learn more from you, and more specifically what you're offering. But the first question is, what do you recommend to your students, or what are you seeing your students experience about how to negotiate what I'll call the extreme contrast between what you're teaching and what most of us are still experiencing in the regular world? So, one option with for someone who wants to live a very earth connected, spiritually connected life, is to remove oneself from the so-called regular human world, to live at the edges in some way. And that can work very, very well. You can live more secluded from human community or civilization. You can craft for yourself an alternative type of work, which you're modeling. Many people, however, are still engaged in or enmeshed in what we'll call, what is viewed currently as regular life, our technological, science-based world that often is unaware of its own stories, disconnected from the earth, disconnected from spirituality. So, what do you either see your students experiencing as they negotiate this contrast, or what do you recommend to people who are trying to negotiate this contrast between the two worlds?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So relevant for everybody, really, myself included. And so the world that I'm talking about and the language I'm using in describing it is biomancy. I view it as a bridge. I view it as a bridge, and it has to be a bridge. We're all dependent. Everyone listening to this, for sure, is dependent in some way on what you might call the technological matrix that supports us. So I am certainly not 100% self-sufficient, and I don't know anyone who is, even people who are. And, I do my best to be as natural and self-sufficient as possible. But that's not the reality. The reality is that we're all in this together. And so I like to think of it as forming bridges and finding common language as much as you can. And science is a brilliant common language. Science is the common language that's accepted by both worlds, really. And so what I teach to people is to learn enough of the science language that can make you feel very comfortable in how grounded and real and important and valuable and practical it is what you're doing. How, there's so much science now that documents how, for example, if we do energy movement practices, and I'm just, for example, Tai Chi or Qigong is one form of that. Yoga is another form of an energy movement practice. And there's science that shows how that changes our mitochondrial function, which generates all the energy in our body, pretty much, or how that changes our genetic expression, or how that regulates our autonomic nervous system. The science is all there. How the same could be applied to most of the holistic disciplines now. And so to come at it from that angle, and to come at it from this very practical, place of, here's what I teach, here's why it works, here's how it works, and look, I feel great doing it. Don't you want to try? Here are all my clients that feel great doing it. Don't you want to try? And so that's the way we it's like, again, we're all in this together. It's not like one side or the other. That's an illusion, There are so many illusions. And so for me, biomancy is about ending the illusion of separation, of science and spirit. It doesn't have to be that way. It wasn't. It was only very recently, like, we've mentioned before, that we have thought in that way. And so it's a small step, a very small step to coming back into reality. And science is actually proving that reality. And so true science, high science, will be the undoing of dogmatic science in the end, as well as will our direct experience and our faith in that, and our trust and confidence, and our it's sometimes described it as a world of feminine magic, and I use the word feminine. It's available for all humans, whatever your gender. But when I say feminine, I'm referring to this deep body awareness, this intuitive awareness, this relational awareness, this connected, what we call intuition, gut feelings, psychic or a native psychic phenomenon. The more we trust in that, and in addition to gathering information from other sources, right? So we gather a bunch of different information, but when we trust the power of our unconscious mind, our back brain, to guide us in these most important matters, and our heart to guide us, we will go so far. And it's so, I love the neurosciences as well, and how there's a new field called it's the field of unconscious cognition, and of how our unconscious mind is so adept. It's so much smarter than our rational, logical mind in making complex decisions, and can do so very quickly. And so what we find is that when there really matters of importance, relationship, meaning, and what's meaningful in our lives, and where we should go from here, what our next step should be. It's these deeper knowings, these deeper intelligence that guide us much better than our rational mind. So it's been proven where our unconscious decision making is very, very good.
Yes, yes. I really appreciate your metaphor of the bridge and how anyone who feels called to engage in the ways that you and I have talked about today can explore the various types of bridges that you've laid out and can also choose to exist as a bridge for other people. So that is really, I think, a very useful and inspiring concept. I love that you are kind of codifying and formally offering learning through your online university. So, as we start to move toward a close of this delightful conversation, please tell our listeners, what exactly are you offering online and how might they learn more from you?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm so excited about this, and this is really the culmination of a lifetime of learning, and it's to be able to do that, to be able to break it down for people, and to give step-by-step entryways into this world. So at the end of it, you can come away with real skills, real grounded experience, real healing experiences, real tools and techniques to, for your own life and friends and family and for your clients and etc. So, ironically, one of the things, I just have to say this is that, well, how does this relate to the world of business and, the kind of the normal kind of muggle world, well, let me tell you, in 10 years, every business is going to be needing people to help them do these kind of things, because the world's going to demand it. Our ecosystems are going to demand it. In 10 years, it's going to be like the new yoga. It's so important, and so it's again, really practical. But what I offer for folks is through Biomancy University is different kinds of programs, different levels of engagement or commitment to begin exploring this world. And the easiest is a monthly drop-in process where I have a monthly drop-in workshop, and there's an online community app where people exchange ideas and share stories and begin to experience the world of biomancy. It's a 1 month commitment, and not even that necessarily. You can just do the workshop, and so that happens every month on an ongoing basis. And then I have year-long study programs. I have a do-it-yourself kind of at your own pace program. It's a 12-month program, and it's the Foundations Biomancy Immersion, or Foundations of Biomancy. And there's an enormous amount of information and practice in there, enough to keep you busy for a year for sure. And then there's the people who really, really want to do it, they're either for personal transformation or because they want to begin to bring some of these principles into their vocation, their healing vocation, or their artistic vocation, or their poetry, or their, whatever it is. There are a lot of people who are in the different kinds of healing arts in particular that are drawn to it. And it's a really it's a rigorous and diploma granting year-long program that trains people in the science and in the information, and as well as the bioenergetics in the embodied energetic practice, as well as doing journey work, imaginal journey work. And so it's a it's a comprehensive program. So I offer all of these things to different people who some may just want to explore. And there are a lot of free resources on my website. So there's a short film called Biomancy Our Future, and that was very fun to create that. We created that this year, and a lot of essays that have referenced science. And so there are also a lot of free resources for people who just want to dip their toes in and learn more.
Beautiful. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Azra, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today. To our listeners, you can find Azra Bertrand, MD, at azrabertrand.com. And thank you so much again for your time, Azra.
Thank you, Chara. My pleasure.
This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Visit newearth1.com.